Our next session is a practical one. It's the do's and don'ts of AI and health marketing. And I think we're really on to something with this topic because you could tell from the questions for that last panel, you guys have very kind of granular work-specific questions, which is great because that's why we're here. Just a little introduction to this next panel. Best practices in health marketing usually take years to develop. Given the speed with which AI has captured the industry's attention, I mean, think about how we started talking about this and when we started talking to it. It's been like since the New York Times first kind of came out with the first big piece about AI, which was college students using it to write papers for themselves. It's kind of the first time it really came into public consciousness. It was in October of 22, so it's not that long ago. So there's already a ton of success stories that we've seen in this field of this particular field of marketing, but we also have cautionary tales. So on this next panel, marketers on both sides of the equation will share their experiences working with AI, forging the most up-to-date set of do's and don'ts. So get out a pen and pencil or record this into your favorite AI app. And please welcome to the stage Ben Beckley, the CEO at RevHealth, Aaron Fulmer, the VP of Product Management at DeepIntent, Tarak Shah, Senior Director and the Head of U.S. Customer Engagement at Ferring Pharmaceuticals, and my colleague, the moderator, MM+M's Senior Reporter, Lecia Bushak.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm excited to moderate this panel on the do's and don'ts of AI in healthcare marketing. It's a bit of a follow-up to the previous panel where we sort of delved into an existential question about AI. But this panel is going to talk a little bit more about some of the practical aspects of how you can incorporate AI into your workflow and sort of where our panelists have seen that done most successfully. And before we begin, I want to mention that we will probably be taking questions at the end if we have time as well. So if you have a question that didn't get answered in the previous panel or anything else pops up, please feel free to submit your questions via the QR code. So I wanted to start out by asking all of our panelists, where have you seen AI incorporated successfully in your respective positions in the last year, and what are some of the main do's that you have sort of gleaned from your experiences? And Tarak, I'll start with you. I know that you've seen AI sort of on the customer engagement side. Where have you seen it implemented successfully?
Sure. So good morning, everyone. Sorry, that's loud. I'm Tarak Shah. I head up our customer engagement team at Ferring. A little bit about my team. So the customer engagement team partners with our commercial and medical teams on their customer engagement strategies. So we'll help our commercial and medical teams build their customer engagement strategies, those experiences, and then we'll help execute, enable, and optimize those strategies through an omnichannel approach. And one of our team's key pillars is innovation. So how do we take engagement to the next level with our customers, whether it's HCPs or patients? And how do we use AI, and specifically Gen AI, how do we embed that into our organization, embed that into our brands, and into our engagement models to truly create that personalized experience for our customers? And so this is a big area of focus for my team and for myself. And we are using Gen AI, and we're planning to use Gen AI in a couple of different ways. I think the previous panel talked about the ability of Gen AI to take large amounts of data sets and be able to process that and summarize it in a very quick manner. And we're doing that in a couple of ways. One is KOL identification. So for example, we take large amounts of data sets that's available in the public domain to help us identify thought leaders based off of publications, based off of conference engagement, based off of digital online influence, and be able to very quickly identify key thought leaders within our therapeutic areas, and also using that technology to be able to provide us with sentiment analysis. So what are these thought leaders saying about our products, about our competitor products, about our therapeutic area, or key topics in our therapeutic area? So that's kind of one way that we're using Gen AI to process data in a very quick manner to give us meaningful and actionable insights. Similarly, we're looking at how we can create some type of tool like that, let's call it like a Gen AI sort of co-pilot for our sales force. Because as part of this digital transformation, we are providing our sales force colleagues with a lot of different data sets about their customers. And so how do we use Gen AI to be able to quickly process all of this data and come up with, very quick synopsis or summary for the rep or for the key account manager. Let's call it pre-call planning on steroids, right? So, I'm about to go see Dr. Smith. Tell me everything I need to know about Dr. Smith since my last visit. What is that next best message? What is that next best action? And so on and so forth. On the content side of things, we're looking at how we can use Gen AI to create hyper-personalized content at scale. And there's a couple of opportunities there. And then also on the patient support side, we're looking at how we can use Gen AI to be able to answer patients' questions. For example, if we have coaches that are supporting patients, rather than, sifting through like a 100-page, knowledge document or resource, being able to use something like Gen AI to be able to answer that question very quickly for our patients, and then use or utilize our staff to be able to provide more value to those patients in other ways. And then just getting into sort of the do's and don'ts. I think Steve might have heard me say this at South by Southwest, but I would say, my recommendation in terms of do is fall in love with the problem. Don't fall in love with the technology. It's very important that we focus on what it is we're trying to solve for. What is that business challenge? And that could be an internal challenge. That could be an external challenge. And what is that opportunity we're trying to address? Because otherwise, we're just going to be focusing on the technology, and I don't think your organization is going to be really ready to be able to adopt it if there truly isn't a problem or a challenge you're trying to solve for.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. No, I totally agree, especially on the problem to solve, right? From the technology aspect, it's something we learned. We developed our own chatbot, got excited about it. We put it into our Slack in our DeepIntent internal organization. We're like, guys, you can ask it all of these questions about all of your digital campaigns. Oh, by the way, DeepIntent, programmatic DSP, activating, across like omni-channel, digital out of home, display, native, audio, CTV, everything. So we have all these campaigns running with all of these data points, and it's one of those common things is like, how is that campaign running? How's that brand doing? And you got to make a lot of clicks. You got to remember where it is, click on the right thing. So we launched this Slack bot internally, and maybe 3 people used it over like 2 weeks. And we were like, well, we were following up, asking like, well, why didn't that work? And people were like, I just don't know what to say. Like, what can it do? What can it do? Can I ask it what it can and can't do? You get into all these problems, and it was like, oh, that was a quick learning that we were then able to take and say, okay, so we got to tailor it and personalize it and give people like jumping off points. And so that's like our newest product is a co-pilot where it comes up with like personalized recommendations. So what our goal is to get the trader in on the platform, and we help them do 2 things. Primarily, they first come in and they say like, let's help you fix the flat tires of your campaigns. Like, hey, something's not working here. We know what it is. We want to help you like get in, look at that thing, give you some recommendations, some next best actions, and help you get out, which is onto your second part of your job, which should always be the most important one, which is like actually doing like deep dive analysis, right? And like looking at the data points, looking at what's working, what's not working, and making those recommendations. Otherwise, people get, way too wrapped up in spending on the first part of just like, trying to just troubleshoot, and even that troubleshooting is really hard. So, back to Tarak's point, we took what the trader persona is, which is like doing those 2 actions, and then applied this technology toward that direction, and that's where we're seeing all these gains now, is being able to have this recommendation engine for flat tires, and now we're generating insights based on how we see those campaigns performing against clinical claims data. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to move everybody into the more of the realm of like, hey, be more of a analytics-driven thinker, look at the intelligence here that we have, and like these things, we want to help you get through them as quickly as possible. And so yes, it's not just getting excited with the technology and throw a chatbot in the app and tell people like, it's there, go use it. Like that it just lands flat. So you got to prompt people and help show them and guide them towards those experiences.
I'm not going to be an echo. This topic that we're talking about here, we're all really familiar with this. RevHealth, you may know, it's an advertising, marketing, communications agency. Every agency is trying to figure this out. Everything Tarak talked about, everything Aaron talked about, we're trying to figure that out as well. So the influencing, we have the products that do that. The omni-channel flat tire idea, we have the products that do that too. I think what is important in the do category is getting our talent up to snuff on this topic and helping them fail quickly and getting them to try these tools and understand, what is that prompt? There was a moderation earlier where they were talking about, are our jobs at risk? And the people who don't lean into this, yes, the job is at risk. And I think that's what we're thinking about as an organization, or who's the talent that's leaning into this? Where do we find talent that is going to lean into this? And that's an absolute do. We have to find the right talent and then teach them our assets, teach them how to prompt and engage with this talent. Other thing we're trying to think about as an agency is, obviously, it's all transactions, and how do we speed up those transactions? And there was a comment earlier on another panel about, are you going to build it or are you going to go buy it? And we're taking the build approach, where it's a little bit more proprietary, where we can get an intake from a client and we need a basic transaction created, a banner ad. And I've sat down on my desk, prompted it myself, and in 7 minutes had the banner ad. I forgot to type in HTML, so I only got the copy. But it's those types of learning moments and those failures that I experience that help everyone kind of learn how to move forward. So there's a little bit of that. The third thing we kind of talk about at the agency is this idea of truth. And we have an opportunity in our industry to be the beacon of truth and light of information. 26 years ago, Google came to the world. It did not know what truth was. It was serving up searches and bringing content to people, but it had to be trained to go find the source of truth. AI is still early enough that it has not been trained to find the source of truth. Make no mistake, I went on Chat GPT or Gemini before this conversation to say, well, what are the topics I should talk about? And I get a long article back with a lot of references, and I go check all those references, and they're all broken links because it didn't know that those weren't the source of truth. And so I think, again, having that human factor is really important to do the due diligence and make sure that we're heading in the right direction. But as marketers, pharma marketers, as advertising agencies or communications professionals, we can be the influencer on where that truth lands and really help the population.
I wanted to sort of follow up on that. In our previous conversation, you had brought up that truth aspect, and I believe one of the examples you used was Mr. Beast, and Mr. Beast sort of being this competing source of truth to pharma, and AI is sort of, where is AI gleaning its truth, and what does it deem as truth? Can you talk a little bit more about how pharma can sort of implement those ways of being that beacon of truth within the AI context?
Yeah, the Mr. Beast comment was, I have two boys, 15 and 16, so they're very interested in him. And it was interesting to see that he signed that contract with Amazon Prime, a huge deal. But TikTok was mentioned earlier with Wegovy, and it's awesome that that's on TikTok. But TikTok's algorithm has nothing to do with truth. It has to do with influencers and subscribers. And if Mr. Beast has the most subscribers, does that make him the source of truth? And so back to our responsibility, it's to make sure the links aren't broken when the AI bot goes and finds the information. And I think that's a struggle we might have, is there's so much content that we've put out over the years, and as we've launched drugs, and as they've gotten new indications, and as we've closed down websites or brought new websites or forgot we had a website out there, the AI bots are going to find it, and they're going to think this is truthful, and then that link is broken, and then we've ruined a communication journey, whether it's with the HCP or with the patient. So I think our responsibility is, again, to make sure that we are cleanly putting out information, and whatever information exists out there, we're going through the process of cleaning it up. I liked your analogy of the flat tires, because there are tools, like you described, that you can go through the 6,000 tactics you have in your arsenal, and you can already find out which ones are dead, and then make sure those are shut down permanently so that our future isn't being pointed in those directions.
Yeah, definitely. It's one thing we talk about a lot internally, which is it's great when it works until it doesn't. Right. The second, I like what you brought up, which is like the trust aspect, which is when you're on the edge of these technologies and it feels like magic until it stops feeling like magic, right? And you have a broken link or that trust is broken. And then what if they walk away from that tool permanently from one bad little interaction? So it's something that we're always balancing. And it's where like the flat tires come in. It's like, okay, well, flat tires are safe. Like there's an instruction manual. You look here, you look there, you can cross-reference those. While we still internally are still, trying to level up the complexity, but we run into those things, which is like, the classic, you ask the LLM to do something twice and you get two different answers. So until we start to solve those things and can like make it more consistent, you got to play with the trust aspect a lot and keep it in mind.
Yeah, and one of the ways that we are de-risking and making sure that there's a valid sort of source of truth in the information that we're ultimately generating from a Gen AI perspective is, we'll actually build the algorithm or the model using our own data. So, I think a lot of companies are doing this now where you're actually training the model with your own, structured and unstructured data, and you're basically creating that firewall so that you're not actually pulling in data from public sources. And that way you make sure that, your information is authentic and it's your own information, so you can put your rubber stamp on it. I think from an organizational perspective, this is, and maybe we'll kind of segue or talk about some of the talent needs here, but it's, do we have the resources internally to actually do this? So this is a question that, we ask ourselves, and I'm sure a lot of companies, maybe not the massive companies like the big pharma organizations, but maybe the small organizations is, do we build this ourselves, or do we buy it? And do we need to outsource a lot of this? And even things like, do we have the right talent who knows how to create the right sort of prompts, so that we're ultimately getting the right outputs from the model, things like that we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, the private models are like really promising, and I don't know if you guys have run into this as well, but it's like the data quality as well, and like the source of data sets that you need was something that I don't think we anticipated being such a like a high bar to jump. You see all these tech demos of this thing working really well, and you're like, oh, I can just throw a bunch of PDFs at it, some unstructured help center articles, and it can just like pull it apart. And it's like, no, it's still the same adage, right? Like garbage in, garbage out. So if you're feeding it as like training material, stuff that's not, very legible to it, and that's where, finding the right talent who knows those areas and like, okay, no, you want to structure it all in the same way, in the same HTML, because that's going to help it process these things, learn, train, and then deploy better. So it's all of those things. But yeah, from like a data quality perspective and trying to explain to it, like, an impression is valuable because of this. It's like stuff we take as like, oh, common sense, like media CPMs, like budget, those are important variables here. But you have to like tell it explicitly and then have someone who's, or a team of people who are like structuring all of that in a way so when you train your model on it, you get, quality back out.
Just real quick on the data topic too, I think really important in terms of is we're dealing in many cases with medical information, and sometimes it's de-identified medical information, or it's not yet approved clinical information, and dumping it into this database. The security of that data, I think, is more important now than we've ever experienced in our lives. And we've seen a lot of breakdowns, even in the news recently, of large companies losing large data sets. And now we're actually talking about patient information, healthcare records. And I think we as responsible employers and companies need to think about and be a little bit more diligent than ever before on that security of the data. I've seen it more now in the engagement with our client relationships, that expectation that as an agency, we have the barriers in place. And again, back to why we're doing it more of a build model, it allows us to control the whole sandbox that we're playing within, not to let that data seep out.
One of the other topics that was raised in our previous conversation is sort of around maintaining the human element in AI. And I know that's something that's been brought up in previous panels as well. And there's this sort of big question swirling around AI of, are we going to lose the care in healthcare? So I wanted to ask you all, what is the importance of maintaining the human element in AI? What does that look like? And, what are some practical ways that it can be implemented?
Do you want to go? I'll go.
Yes.
Just
go
in
ahead.
terms of the healthcare, I mean, the idea that I had around maintaining the care and the human element, this is such a transactional experience with AI, and there is no human involved. And they may, an image might come back with 6 digits, right? We've seen the hallucinations. You can ask it to write a report, and it comes back with broken links. You need that human element, that safety net or that guard to basically influence that it moves in the right direction. I read an article a couple weeks ago just about the physician experience and how their day is so transactional. And by the time they get to the afternoon of that day, the transaction just becomes so monotonous that they just quickly make the normal decision versus actually thinking about the human sitting in front of them. And I think the care element of healthcare, what we're working in, could get really diminished if we keep thinking that we're just going to make transactions more effective. So I just think that care part and the human element is really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, from a pharma marketing perspective, I think we're looking for ways in which we can incorporate these capabilities in a way where we can automate things faster, right? So if we know that we have certain content that resonates with a certain customer at an individual level, how quickly can we create that content and deploy that content through the right channel to that right customer. I don't think we're quite there yet. I mean, if we can't even, for example, be able to automate subject line messaging in our emails because of the risk of, and this has happened, where you use AI and AI is coming up with a subject line that's not exactly approved because it didn't include the brand name, for example, or it didn't include the molecule name, something like that, where there's still work to be done there, right? And of course, working with our legal, medical, regulatory partners, working together to set the appropriate parameters and being able to create or enhance a process where we can create content much faster in a way where instead of, having to sit and review, thousands of pieces of content, we can give them more or less a framework and a parameter of what that looks like, what the variants of the content that's going to look like, and so on and so forth, and be able to get that content approved much faster. But I don't think we're quite there yet. And so going back to the human element, it is really important that we have the people that ultimately is making the decisions. Maybe in the future we can get to that point where it's actually AI that's not only generating but also being able to deploy that content in an automated way to the appropriate audience. I think we'll get there at some point. Even with the Salesforce, the example I mentioned before of creating some type of tool that can give them sort of the recommendation, next best action. Again, the Salesforce is really who knows the customer best, right? And so we empower them to sort of make that call. We'll give them the recommendations, we'll give them the insight, but they have to make that call in terms of ultimately what they're going to communicate to that customer and how they're going to engage with that customer.
Yeah, definitely echo all the points. I mean, I think it's no accident why everything is getting branded co-pilots, and that's truly I think the experience you want to strive for right now is having something right there by your side. And another key component is, you brought up like privacy and security, but also just transparency. It's like, hey, here's how I'm doing these things, and like, here's how I'm sourcing the data. To the degree at which you can do it, obviously, an LLM can't reveal all of itself because it doesn't know that, but to the degree at which you can provide that to the user and say like, hey, we did these things and we didn't do it for you, but here's the actions to take right before you hit go, right before you hit send on the email. And by the way, here's how I, sourced it, and here's the thought process in it.
We have a few audience questions coming in, about 5 minutes left. So, Tarak, there's one for you. Can you comment on a build versus buy perspective as you look for innovation in customer experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll share my personal this is Tarak Shah's view, not exactly the view of the organization or of the world, but I am a firm believer that when we're working with our external partners, whether it's our creative agencies or our digital agencies, they truly are a partner. They are an extension of our organization. And so my personal philosophy is to lean into our agencies, our external partners, our solution providers, and leverage their capabilities. Ben, you mentioned that your organization is taking the approach of building, right? So that alleviates the need for an organization like mine to have to build it internally. Now, of course, there's going to be internal dynamics that are sort of in play there, but my personal philosophy is if you have somebody out there that has that capability, that has that solution, and is very mature and it's proven, why not just adopt that and incorporate that into your organization and into your workflows. I've had the opportunity to go to a number of conferences this past year, and when Gen AI really kind of exploded, last year or sometime like a year and a half ago, I think it really was for us in pharma very much conceptual. But what I've seen recently is that a lot of companies now really have proven robust solutions, not just from an AI perspective, but actually from a Gen AI perspective. So the landscape is completely changed. It's completely shifted just in this past year, and it'll continue to evolve very, very rapidly as well.
I was just going to say on the proven idea, that's always a challenge in my industry is like, have you done this before? And I think the beautiful thing about AI is it allows us to quickly prove something out, whether we've done it before or not. To the pilot example, you're able to run a lot of these co-pilots to get the proof so that the marketers or the pharmaceutical companies can see that, okay, this will work in this city and now we can take it to a national scale. And so we really advocate for that. Let's do this real-time exercise on the AI or journey that we're taking to prove it out.
Yeah, and then the final point is, on build versus buy, we bias towards build, but then we do buy some solutions along the way because we want to pick and choose the battles, right? And like the engineering resources and where they're going. To my point about like data quality and everything, I guess, when you're doing those buy maybe solutions, like ask them like, what was the training data you gave them? What did you train it on? What did that look like? And do diligence on that as much as you can to try to understand like how does that match to your organization? Because I think there's a lot of people also doing very flashy tech demos out there that's like, look how great this is, but it's like, well, now how would that work in a real world environment that's not this like perfect database or this perfect structured document that it trained on? So just asking good questions, but I think there are a lot of good vendors out there.
We have a few more questions and just about 2 minutes left, so I'll try to get to some of these. What are some AI solutions that you are most excited about? And there's another one that is, what would be your killer use case for AI that you would love to solve?
I'll start with a use case or like a future-looking one. I don't know if anyone has seen Devin, the like software engineering demo from I think Cognition AI. I see one person, nodding vigorously because it's pretty impressive. So it's Cognition AI. They created this like AI for a software engineer. How is that related to like pharma marketing? Well, I think it paints a good picture of how there's a company that's pretty close at showing how an AI can do long-term planning and reasoning. So watch the tech demo. I would highly encourage it, but it lays out like, hey, I want you to investigate this API, and it shows you like it makes a checklist of 8 things and says, okay, I'm going to do these 8 things, and it shows you in real time how it's like reasoning through all of them. And I think it was just a wild example of the future to come, not just in software coding, but analytics, and then all of the other things that LLMs are good for, and sort of maybe a glimpse into the future.
Yeah, I'm personally excited about solutions that can really help us create hyper-personalized content at scale. And I think there's some really good solutions that are out there. It really is impressive. I mean, whether you're creating personalized videos or slide decks, images. I mean, just seeing the whole sort of end-to-end process and then comparing that to like what the process was like before in terms of, I mean, you all know what it takes to create videos, right? And the storyboarding, and it's a huge manual process. It's very time consuming. Being able to automate that and be able to personalize it is incredible.
And go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm just trying to get it right. I mean, we're all in the early stages of this. I would love to think 5 or 10 years from now, but we have something right now at our fingertips that we need to figure out to get these processes right, to make sure we're not having the 6 digits. How do we just train the folks to prompt correctly? How do we get good product out there? How do we improve the transactions inside, again, the agency to just make it quicker and more efficient? But we need to get it right.
Great. Well, we are out of time, and thank you so much to our panelists for joining us today.
Thank you.